Welcome to the Cold Case Christianity broadcast, the only Christian case-making program hosted by a cold case homicide detective. J. Warner Wallace has been investigating cold case murders in Los Angeles County for over a decade. His work has been featured on Fox News, Court TV, and Dateline. For more information about Jim's work and the case for Christianity, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. Now, here's your host, J. Warner Wallace.
Thanks for joining us at Cold Case Christianity. I'm J. Warner Wallace, and in case you're wondering about this unusual background today, I happen to be sitting in the city of Cincinnati, Ohio, here to do several presentations to high schoolers and their parents at the Great Homeschool Convention. And I've been doing this year because we've started writing, as you know, kids' books, all of our adult books, Cold Case Christianity, God's Crime Scene, and now Forensic Faith will eventually all be kids' versions as well. I just finished illustrating God's Crime Scene for kids, and Cold Case Christianity for kids has been out for some time. So we do occasionally work with homeschool groups and student groups. I love working with students, and in fact we're doing that again this weekend. Now, I thought, really, should I try to sequester myself in a hotel room and do the show, given the kind of background I might have? You know, I'm using a lamp from the table. I had to close. It's a great view of the river behind me out this window. I'm on the 27th floor of the Hilton Hotel here in downtown Cincinnati. But if I open the drapes, I notice that the backlighting is so strong I can't even record anything. So I'm going to look like I'm in a cave for this episode so that I can not skip a week. I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but if you're producing content and trying to make the case for Christianity, and you're trying to do it a number of different ways, either you're writing, you're producing curriculum, you're doing podcasts, you're doing television shows like this, all the different levels of media. Our website, it's 5 days a week. I have to post something there 5 days a week. Those responsibilities at some point become overwhelming. And what really cuts into my opportunities is the travel schedule. I remember when I first started this, I was coming out of my law enforcement career. I was working cases. I had 3 at the same time getting ready for trial as Cold Case Christianity. The first book was getting ready to publish. And I thought, how in the world am I going to be able to do all of that? Well, you know, God's good, and somehow you managed to figure out a way to do it. And that's always been the case with our ministry. But I have been realistic about the fact that it's often difficult to write and produce the kind of content that we think helps young people, helps Christians defend what we believe in the culture, while maintaining a speaking schedule. Now, these things are symbiotic. They're helpful. The one feeds the other. So the first couple of years was doing as many as 70, 75 events a year for the first 3 years. This last year, I cut it down to the 50s. I'll probably be in the 50s this year. But next year we'll probably try to do less. But the long story short, that's why I'm coming to you today from a hotel room. Now, people I admire like James White and other apologists have kind of done this kind of thing from the road. So I'm hoping that what we're going to be talking about is actually more valuable than the setting I'm talking about it in. So let's begin by reviewing just really why I wrote a book called Forensic Faith. It was really in an effort to help the church realize there's a difference between experiencing something and just making a case for it from your common experience, and actually being able to make an evidential case for what you believe about God. It turns out that religious believers of every stripe, regardless of where you may come from, can probably point to some kind of an experience when making a case for what they believe. So if we do that as Christians, we don't sound a lot different than every other religious believer on the planet. On the other hand, we are the one group that could actually make the case from something more than just our experiences. We could make the case based on the evidence of stuff that's happened in the first century that has been recorded historically, and we can either verify it or falsify it by looking at the data, by looking at the historical record. We could even talk about whether or not God exists based on trying to explain evidence in the universe, which is what I tried to do in God's Crime Scene. So my point here is that we are in a worldview. If you are a Christian, you hold to a worldview that could be made, the case could be made for this worldview evidentially. And that is what really, I think, delineates and separates Christianity from other religious worldviews. So what I wanted to do before I take the first break here is I want to iterate for you really something that's kind of controversial among certain circles in Christianity, and that is, are young people really leaving the church? I talk about it in Forensic Faith, and I've been talking about this for years. And I first noticed it when I was a youth pastor. I consistently saw, first of all, I saw at my own pastorate, I saw that high schoolers that we were graduating didn't fare very well when they went to college. And at first I thought, well, is it something I knew I was doing something wrong. I knew that there was something I was doing as somebody who was an artist, came out of the arts. Although I was a cop and I didn't come to faith through the arts, I came to faith through my investigative process. I found that the youth pastorate might be the place where I could express the artistic side of my own life, my own interests. And so I did that for a year. It was definitely, every weekend was an experience, visually, musically, sensory. I mean, everything we did, we were focused on experience. And those are the kids who walked away their first year in college. When I saw that, when I was hearing from the friends we still had, the younger siblings we still had in our youth pastorate, that their older friends and family members were walking away, I realized I needed to shift gears, and I did. And we took the evidential approach that I took coming to faith myself. And everything in our youth pastorate shifted. But I started to collect the data on young people leaving the church. I know I've got friends who will kind of argue that this isn't really maybe necessarily, it's an anomaly of how they were doing the poll statistics, or that this is really not much different than it has been in the past. Here's one thing I know. The number of young people in the culture who are claiming no religious affiliation, the nones, where they check none on the forms when being polled about what religious denomination or what religious worldview they hold, none. Well, that rise of numbers in the nones is directly proportionate to the number of young people who are leaving the church, the Christian church. So in other words, as our culture becomes more and more secular, it seems to be becoming more and more secular by loss of Christian believers, who are now calling themselves, or at least claiming they have no religious affiliation. Now, do they still believe in God? Perhaps. Some do. As a matter of fact, most would not say they're atheists now. They just don't believe Christianity is true. Regardless, if we believe that the claims of Christianity are true, then to reject Christ as Lord, to reject Christ as God, puts you in a place of jeopardy, right? So whether they are completely atheists or just reject the claims of Christianity, either one of these two positions puts them in the same state of jeopardy. I'm interested in why they would leave and what we can do to slow that down or stop it entirely. And that's what my work has been based on for all these years. Now, I've collected the data and I maintain it. I updated it about a month and a half ago. I think about maybe 2 months ago, at coldcasechristianity.com. The article is called Updated, Are Young People Really Leaving the Church? And I want you to take a look at it if you're interested, because you can download every article at Cold Case Christianity as a PDF file. And if you do that, the hyperlinks are still active in the PDF file. So the beauty of that is you can take that PDF file, throw it on your hard drive, throw it on your phone, and you can actually link to those articles. And I have listed every survey related to young people leaving the church for about the last 10 years or more. And I just list them, I summarize them. It's a long PDF, but the great thing about it is it's updated and you can actually see it for yourself and you can make your own decision. Are young people really leaving the church? Let's cut to the chase. Yes, they are. They're leaving the church. And we have a responsibility as the elder folks who are in the church to help them know if this is true or not. So if they leave because they're chasing their passions, as I always say, that's on them. If they leave because they don't think it's true, that's really on me as their dad, as their pastor, as their elder brother in the faith. I want to make sure that folks, because listen, we're all going to chase our passions. That kind of stupid's been going on forever. I get it. I've done it myself. Been there, bought a t-shirt, but I can tell you that's different than people who don't think it's true anymore. So I want to make sure that if you're leaving, look, that's going to be on you. And it's like we said last week, it's that rubber band theology, right? The further you get away, the more it stings when you come back. Don't go too far. So That's our first point of clarification. I really wrote Forensic Faith. I've written Cold Case and God's Crime Scene as a concern, out of concern for young people. And I really had young people in mind as my target audience when writing those books, although I know people have written to me and said, hey, God's Crime Scene is a great book, but man, it's a high-level book. Well, it really isn't, but I understand that when you talk about science and philosophy, things get a little dicier than when you're just talking about how we study history. And that's the difference between God's Crime Scene and Cold Case Christianity. But I'll tell you, I actually think that God's Crime Scene is the more critical book for young people in the culture because it does address the issues of science and philosophy that I think our young people are facing first and foremost. That being the case, let's take a quick break. I want to come back and read you a letter that was really part of the larger experience I had as a leader and as a writer online that really deals with the kinds of challenges that young people face in the culture. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to read you a letter. I've got it here on my laptop in front of my hotel room here. This is kind of a makeshift studio that was written to me about 2 years ago. And as soon as I was writing Forensic Faith as this letter came into me, and I remember thinking, why haven't I gone back through my email and kind of dug out all the notes that have been sent to me over the years from young people who really felt like they were struggling to know if Christianity was true, and were appreciative of the kind of approach I'm describing in Forensic Faith. And sure enough, this letter comes in email, and I realized, wow, so God actually kind of woke me up and reminded me we should talk a little bit about this. So I want to include, I asked for permission from this student to read this letter. You'll see it in my book in one of the earliest chapters, where it's talking about the response and the kind of experience he had in university and why an evidential faith is so important. Let's get after it. Here's what he says. My dad was a Southern Baptist preacher, and while I was growing up, I basically lived at the church. I knew all the Bible stories and was even baptized when I was 8. After graduating high school, I went to college to get a degree in mechanical engineering. Now, one might think a degree of this kind would involve little to no discussion of whether or not God exists, or if Jesus was a real person. But I encountered these and many more objections. I had a literature class where the professor gave us a presentation on how Jesus was copied from other gods and how this explained away the mythology of Jesus, quote unquote. I had an electromagnetics course in which the professor viciously attacked the concept of intelligent design. I had a space technology class in which the professor vehemently argued for the existence of aliens but refused to acknowledge the existence of God. These are just a few examples of the many interactions I had with many of my professors. Unfortunately, most of our fellow brothers and sisters in Christ are severely lacking in training, and when they encounter even the weakest arguments, they're not prepared. As a Christian in the college setting, you're being constantly challenged, constantly poked and prodded. It's easy to throw your hands up in the air, becoming convinced your faith is a lie, when you're being trampled every day by both professors and by peers. All Christians, but especially ones in college, must know what they believe and why they believe it if they have any hope of surviving with their faith intact. I think of college almost like an atheist ambush. The Christians are walking in totally unaware of the danger until it's too late and the damage has already been done. That's why I wanted to take the time to thank you. When I entered college, I was struggling with many of the objections I encountered. I discovered your podcast and your careful research. The evidence was incredibly helpful. As a result, I actually exited college with my faith even stronger than when I began. I want to encourage you to keep up the good work. All right, I'm not reading that letter to you to pat myself on the back, but I do want it to be a wake-up call for all of us who might think that, I think faith alone is enough, right? In the sense of just having faith, that's what, of course, from the perspective, if we're talking about what saves us, then yes. But if we're talking about what equips us and prepares us to influence culture, or to even help our own young people stand tall and with calm and resolve in the midst of a challenge like university, then I think we have to add something to this. And this is not against, as we started discussing last week, this is not against the kind of robust, rich, evidential history of Christianity. This is entirely consistent with the history of Christianity. That Jesus, his disciples, the canonical writers, the earliest Christians, and even the command that's on us in 1 Peter 3, we should be ready to rely and lean on the evidence to know why Christianity is true. That's a call on us as Christians to be good case makers, and it's a call on us to do as Jesus did with John the Baptist. When John had doubts and sent his disciples to Jesus, Jesus responded with evidence. And it turns out that this young man who's written to me also exhibits why the evidence is so important. I mean, think about this for a second. I thought it was great when he tells us that he is in a program that is about engineering. Here's what he wrote. He said he went to school to get a degree in mechanical engineering, and one might think a degree of this kind would involve little to no discussion of whether or not God exists or if Jesus was a real person. That's one of the strongest takeaways that I have gotten so far from working with young people, and it's this, that you might be surprised exactly where your Christian faith will be challenged. It's going to be challenged in English literature classes, because if they look at the Bible at all, it'll be as a form of mythology or a form of literature that they don't take as serious history. If you're looking in your philosophy class, then for sure you're going to get challenged. Virtually in every discipline, if there's an instructor who wants to use that platform and that topic matter to twist and turn toward your Christian beliefs, they can do it. The question is, are our students ready? Now, I don't want to over-exaggerate this. And the young man who sent this is named Andrew Dean. Andrew, when he sent me this letter, I'm sure his story is probably repeated over and over and over again. And if I was to open up a call for letters, please send me your letter. If in fact you had the same kind of story, I'm sure I get a ton. But we don't know what percentage of young students, young Christian students, will really be challenged. I can tell you that my son Jimmy, when he was at UCLA, although there were definitely, you could tell that the underlying worldview for his professors was not a religious worldview, was not a theistic worldview, he didn't find himself having to constantly defend or make a case for what he believed. It was just assumed in his classes in psychology that there was no God. It was assumed that the materialistic universe was all there is. It was assumed that the brain is the chief source of whatever you might interpret as your thought life. In other words, not everyone believes in minds. That's something that really a theistic worldview can explain, but not every materialistic, atheistic worldview would accept such a notion. My point is, there'll be a variety of levels in terms of what people are challenged with at university. Not everyone is going to feel the challenge the same way. Andrew's experience, though, I thought was interesting because he's an electrical engineer. So don't think, well, my student's going to go and he's not going to take a class or not going to be in a degree program that will really present this problem for him. Really? Well, how about mechanical engineering? I'm sorry, not electrical, but mechanical engineering. Do you think that program you would have thought in advance would actually present a challenge to your Christian faith? So just be ready. We have to be ready as Christians in every setting to be able to make the case, to give the reason for why Jesus is who he said he was, why we believe that Jesus is who he said he was. Let's take a break. We come back and want to add one more thing about this idea of developing a forensic faith.
Need a speaker for your next conference, retreat, training seminar, or church service? Jim travels around the country, making the case for the existence of God, the deity of Jesus, and the reliability of the Bible. He'd love to partner with you to create a powerful, transformational training experience. Just visit the Cold Case Christianity website and click the Book Me tab. You'll find everything you need to know there, including a list of Jim's speaking topics, promotional materials, Jim's speaking calendar, and a link to connect with our team so we can book your event. Be sure to download the free Cold Case Christianity app from the iTunes Store and the Android Marketplace. The Cold Case Christianity app puts all the resources from coldcasechristianity.com in the palm of your hand. You can read the daily blog, listen to podcasts, and watch videos from within the application. And Jim uses the app to send direct messages to fans of Cold Case Christianity. The app will also link you to all Cold Case Christianity social media and provide you with a direct connection to J. Warner Wallace. Download the app today and become a better Christian casemaker.
Okay, I remember growing up in a law enforcement family, and I watched my dad in a police car for years. Now, he didn't work for Los Angeles Police Department, but he did work in Los Angeles County. He and I and my son all worked in the third largest municipal agency in Los Angeles County. Now, LAPD many years ago had some of the coolest cars. And I remember watching TV dramas. If you watched Adam 12 growing up, if you're my age or even older, a lot of the police dramas, you would see the motto of the Los Angeles Police Department on the side of their car. It is to protect and to serve. And I think there's something about that motto that's kind of catchy. It still remains on their cars today. And why? Well, I think because we are designed in the image of our Creator, that there are times when aspects of our Creator's nature just seem right to us. Even if you denied God's existence, there are times, because you have been designed in His image, when you will end up reflecting His nature whether you like it or not, or the values. Think about this in our culture. Are there any higher values than protecting others and serving others? Aren't those always seen as morally virtuous, positive ideas and values to be held by our culture? Very few people would push back against those two notions, protection and service. Why? Why are these high values? Well, because they reflect the nature of God, who over and over again we see in Scripture is the perfect balance between justice and mercy. It's that justice and mercy balancing act that's so important for us. And we always seem to get it wrong. We are not perfectly balanced in those two ways. God is. We try, if we try to be godly, to hold those two things in balance. Look, as a police officer, if you're all about justice but you're never merciful, then you're just a tyrant and nobody wants to be around you. You're impossible. And you're going to end up hurting people. If you're somebody who's all about mercy but never involved in justice, then you're going to let a lot of people get away with murder, and that's not good for victims or the rest of the culture. You have to have mercy with justice tethered. They're two sides of the same coin. And as you know, mercy without justice is an empty platitude. Justice without mercy is overbearing tyranny. So you have to have these two things in balance. I love that motto on the side of our police car, of the LAPD's police car. I also think that's a motto we should embrace as Christians. We have a duty. This is what a forensic faith is grounded in. This incredible balancing act, this duty to balance justice and mercy. We are called to do the same thing that the LAPD has on the side of their car, to protect and to serve. Now, service seems easy to us, right? Because service is about all those things that we see, answering the needs, being empathetic and compassionate toward the needs of those in our community, and serving those needs. I think if you look at the rich history of Christianity, you will see that we have elevated the game when it comes to that kind of thing. As a matter of fact, in Western culture, probably most universities and most hospitals, the number of hospitals and places where people are served that are tied to the history of Christianity is amazing. It's very robust. We do a good job of that. And I think we're sometimes, though, a little bit hesitant on the truth side, on the justice side, on the protection side. Because when it comes to protection, that's going to involve us having to think about something that's a little more forceful, right? I mean, when we serve, we see that as a very kind of passive kind of approach. I mean, you can love others without even raising your voice, but sometimes to protect others will require you to raise your voice in a culture if you see wrongdoing. Part of protecting is protecting people from being wronged by others. That's even true, not just physically, it's true intellectually, it's true philosophically, it's true theologically. We have a duty to protect and serve. You see this in all of Scripture, right? Of course, all the service, kinds of call to service, those are easily embraced, and all sides of the political spectrum will usually embrace those kinds of things. But those calls to protect from error, to guard the truth, to protect from heresy, those kinds of protection verses always seem to be a little less popular. We have an equal duty as Christians to protect and serve. But if you're going to, you can do service in any religious worldview, any theistic worldview. I remember we used to serve in downtown Los Angeles at a soup kitchen, serving the homeless and preaching the gospel to the homeless. And we were joined by Hindus who also, using the same property, helped us feed the poor, feed the homeless. Any world we can do. Now, when it comes to protection, you are often talking about protecting truth. But in order to protect truth, you have to know something about what is true. Service can require you to know nothing about what is true. But protecting requires you to know and master the truth. And then what you're often protecting people from is falsity, is lies. The lies about how the world is, the lies about the forces that govern the universe, all of these things. Our duty as Christians, if we decide to take an evidential approach to what we believe, is going to be to balance those two ideas of service and protection. Service, I think we get that, but when it comes to protection, that's where I think developing a forensic faith is so valuable, because that's going to require you to do the things I talk about in forensic faith, to see your duty. That's what we're talking about today. To train, which we'll talk about starting next week. To learn how to investigate claims so you can know what is true and what isn't. And then finally, to learn how to communicate those claims to others. We'll be talking about that in future episodes. So I hope you'll join me. And thanks for putting up with this hotel room here in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I'm coming to you today from the Great Homeschool Convention. So I'll hope to see you right back here next week on Cold Case Christianity.
Thanks for joining us at the Cold Case Christianity broadcast. If you're interested in more information about this week's topic, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. For a thorough investigation of the reliability of the New Testament Gospels and the case for Christianity, be sure to purchase Cold Case Christianity. A homicide detective investigates the claims of the Gospels. It's available wherever books are sold.